All right. Hi, guys. Welcome to No CD's Living with OCD Q&A. I am Cassie. I haven't been on for a while, so I'm really excited to be back on here. You'll have to excuse my terrible lighting. I'm definitely out of my element for a little bit, but, really excited to be here. As a disclaimer, I'm not a clinician. I am somebody like you that has OCD, that has either gone through therapy or is currently going through therapy, or maybe you haven't started yet and you're still looking to get started with us. So I'm going to be here to answer any questions that you have and, do what I can to make you feel more comfortable and ready to, start this journey. So I don't think we have anybody on yet, but I will go ahead and start answering some questions that we have. Let's start with the first one. I'm having conversations with my head repeated that I had some time ago. I am also having repeated images that I see some time ago. Please put some perspective into this. So again, for anyone joining, I am not a clinician. I am somebody like you that has OCD, that has been through this struggle, and is still taking it day by day. So I want to start off with just saying I'm sorry that you're going through this right now. I can imagine how hard it is, as somebody that has gone through it myself. It's hard to cope with this, and I think that with OCD, we get into this cycle where we get stuck not only with this repeated image in our head or conversations in our head, but also trying to figure out why we're having it. Which can be just as damaging, right? So I would say, a lot of this is, to be plain and simple, intrusive thoughts. And that's something that, is unfortunately very characteristic with OCD. We get it all the time. So I think recognizing that that's what it is going to be a really good first important step, but then trying not to assign too much meaning to it. Recognizing that, yes, this is an intrusive thought. This is what I'm going through, but I'm not going to try to make sense of this. I'm not going to try to think, what does this mean about me, who I am as a person? It's an intrusive thought, and we have to recognize and hold it with us, but then let it go. And that's kind of where sometimes people will talk about comparing their OCD to like ocean waves or leaves falling, things like that. Okay. Katie wrote, I'm trying to just do what I've always done and assume thoughts that leave and come back are OCD, but now what if my values and everything is changing? What do I know to take as real concern versus OCD? This is a really, really common fear, not knowing what is, what are your values versus what your OCD is telling you. And this is something that, especially, I know for me, one of my themes is moral scrupulosity. So a lot of times it is targeting things that I value, things that are, my morals, who I am as a friend, as a person. So it really starts to get kind of fuzzy when you're not sure what's your OCD and what is you. Sometimes things that I do to help me separate the two are look at how I'm reacting to the thought. So if I get an intrusive thought in my head and I start to panic and I think, I need to figure out what this means right away. If this is true, it causes me some sort of distress. Chances are that's my OCD and it's not a real thought that I'm having. So it's, people that have harm OCD, we don't want to have these harmful thoughts coming into our head. We don't like having these thoughts. They're very distressing. But, when we watch horror stories or, murder mysteries, people that do these things don't really feel distressed about them. So that's something that I try to keep in mind if I ever get an intrusive thought. It's hard enough having to get these thoughts unstuck from our heads, but also trying to remove that meaning is a whole nother thing that, if we can help it, definitely try. It's easier to separate it from us. All right. And also for anyone that's joining, welcome. I know Crappie's saying, I know it's just OCD, but it feels scary and it feels real. It is very scary to deal with. And I'm sorry that you're feeling this right now. It's something that I think it makes us doubt so much about who we are as people. And I think part of the recovery is getting to a point where, we can separate it from ourselves. I always talk about like my OCD, or, hear other people saying their OCD, because it's not us. It's something that's separate from us. And I think that's something that's very important to differentiate. So I'm saying, I also have health anxiety. How do I stop? Health anxiety is something that I think is definitely hard to deal with right now, especially in the time of COVID right now, where everybody is being very, what is being anxious enough about our health, what is not being enough. So I would say the best thing to do, if you feel like this is impacting your everyday life, I would get into therapy. Talk to, if you're not ready to get into therapy, join one of the support groups that talks about, what it's like to start treatment with an OCD, or join a support group that's led by a therapist and hear what their thoughts are about it. We do have support groups based on different subtypes and different stages of where you're at in therapy, whether you're just getting started or, you're down the road and you're helping others. Whatever point you're at, I definitely think that it is worth joining one of them. So, you're definitely not alone in this. I will say that. Health anxiety is something that a lot of people with OCD struggle with, and people without OCD. I know that my OCD, whenever I first went away to college, I had very bad contamination OCD, and my health was something that was very much a big stressor for mine, things being contaminated or being dirty around me. So, chances are, if you're going to a support group bringing something like that up, you're definitely not the only person. Yes, support groups are definitely amazing. I'm going to try to put on my ring light and see if this is any better. And see, no, that is definitely not better. That is very much not better. Okay, so we're going to deal with the weird lighting. It's okay. Yeah, but guys, honestly, drop whatever in the chat you're thinking about. This is very much a Q&A discussion. Like I said, I'm not a clinician. I'm somebody like you that has just dealt with this and is now to a point of recovery. And if anybody else feels like they're in a point of recovery, I would love to, discuss what this looks like for you, where you're at right now in your OCD journey, because as we all know, it's not something that can be cured or magically goes away, and we don't really go back to who we are before. But in my opinion, I think we come out better on the other side. We come out stronger. I think after going through my OCD journey, I have become a stronger person, and I am more grown. And I think I support people better in my personal life that might be struggling, and they know that I've gone through this too. So it kind of opens up a new part of you that you didn't have before. Okay. It's Anna says, real event OCD is ending me. My mistakes are indeed horrible and wrong. Real event OCD is very hard. And I think allowing yourself to heal from that is something that is going to take a lot of compassion. I had somebody tell me one time that, punishing yourself over and over again for something in the past doesn't really help you grow as a person. It kind of just continuously punishes you and makes you feel wrong. So, there's definitely a point in time where I think it's okay to be in that state where we're understanding our mistakes and maybe punishing ourselves. But I think that also gets to a point where we need to learn how to let it go and see how we can grow and become a better person from that point on. I definitely, as somebody that, like I said, that has moral scrupulosity, mistakes and things that I might have done wrong to other people are something that would constantly be something that my OCD would obsess about. And it's very hard to let those thoughts go when it's something that, we care about other people and we feel like we might have done something wrong to somebody or, anything with our mistakes. So I think understanding and looking at it as maybe a growing point, how can I take this mistake that has happened and turn it around to be a better person? Or maybe the next time around that something happens, I can change the outcome for somebody else. I think looking at it that way instead of being in the past might be something that could be really helpful. Okay, Elizabeth said, hi, I'm in recovery right now, and I find it really hard and really challenging, and I'm having setbacks that I feel more frustrated than in the beginning. I hope this is normal. My setbacks don't stem from rumination rather than guilty feelings that make me feel like harm OCD is there lurking in the background, and it's so unsettling. What do you suggest? It's hard whenever we get to this point of recovery and we're kind of like feeling like we're going backwards. It's definitely normal. You're absolutely not the only person that has gone through this. And I think that's why they say that OCD recovery is a journey, like any other recovery. It's a journey because you are going to have setbacks. You're going to have things that crop up. Sometimes people have backdoor anxiety. All of a sudden we think, oh, these thoughts don't bother me. Does that mean I like them? And no, it's just that your ERP is working. I honestly, the best thing that I would suggest is to keep pushing forward with the things that you've learned, and don't let these setbacks make you think that you're not making progress, because you are. I know that whenever I became a peer advisor for an OCD, I never really struggled with POCD. It was something that I may have understood a lot of the intrusive thoughts, and I may have experienced them before, but it was never a major theme of mine. And I remember one night I had a really vivid dream after a call with somebody that I basically dreamt everything that he was telling me about his intrusive thoughts. And it was terrifying. I woke up and was a wreck. I was having intrusive thoughts for like the entire week about POCD themes I had never struggled with before. And I had this thought where I was like, oh my gosh, is this going to change my recovery? Is this going to be a different path that I have to go on? And I kind of thought it was cool that, ERP isn't anything that we lose. It's a skill that we have that we can apply to new things that might crop up, as unfortunate as they are. So it was nice that I could take those skills and say, okay, what is the ERP that I'm going to do for this look like? What are some exposures I'm going to do? And it's definitely not easy, but it's easier knowing what you're going into, if that makes sense. It was a lot easier for me to come about it saying, I know that this is POCD. I know that this is something that, happens to a lot of people. And, it sucks that this is happening now, but there's only one thing I can do, which is fight it and get through this. I'm not going to let myself go backwards. And I think that's the most important thing that you have to tell yourself whenever you get to recovery and some setbacks start to get in the way, is just remind yourself what your goal was in the beginning, what you wanted to achieve in the beginning. And for me, that was being healthier. I knew that I didn't want to continue living like this, and I didn't want to continue living one foot in the present moment and one foot in whatever my OCD was obsessing about. So for me, that was, okay, I have this new theme I have to recognize. I actually went to one of the support groups for the first time ever whenever that happened. And me as a peer advisor, knowing how easy it is to talk about these things once we let ourselves do it, I was terrified to tell these people that I was having POCD thoughts. And I remember saying it out loud and just looking at all the people in the group, and nobody really batted an eye. Nobody looked shocked. Nobody looked confused. And I think that's why I always encourage people to go to the support groups, because even for me, whenever I had this new theme that I didn't really know how to navigate, it was very, very comforting to be in a Zoom call with other people that I knew I didn't have to explain myself to or why I was having these thoughts, and that they would be able to understand me and empathize with me. All right. But yeah, really good questions, guys. And a lot of, I see a lot of questions like asking, how do I stop certain things? I wish there was a simple answer for these. It's really difficult sometimes. And I think it's a learned skill that you understand in ERP therapy. And it really is retraining our mind not to have this fear response to this thought that we get, if that makes sense. Because OCD kind of puts us in high alert. We get this thought that's, all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, why did I think that? And we can't let it go. Either we sit and ruminate on it, or we ask for reassurance because our OCD makes us doubt ourselves. We sometimes do compulsions until we feel like we can let that thought go. And our OCD makes us feel like we're not safe without those things, without things to make us feel like it's okay to let that thought go, or, that somebody else says it's okay. And I think that's the greatest part about ERP is it gives us this strength to say, hey, I don't need this reinforcement, this reassurance. I don't need to do these compulsions. I can get past this and let it go without all these things. Michael, I'm very sorry to hear that your OCD is getting the way of you taking care of yourself. I'm not sure if anyone's moderating this right now, but if maybe we can drop some crisis resources. If anyone ever, speaking of crisis resources, if anyone is ever in a point of crisis that they feel they need somebody to either, right in that moment, they need to talk to somebody, or they need emergency resources and they don't know who to talk to. The suicide hotline is not just for suicide. You can reach out to it for any sort of crisis reason. The people that actually answer that are crisis trained counselors. The crisis text line is a really good one too. If you I can't remember the suicide hotline off the top of my head, but the text one is 741-741, and you just text home to it. And that also sets you up with a crisis counselor through text messages, which I've used myself in the past. It is very nice. You can stay anonymous. It's a really good thing to have handy if you, like I said, if you're ever just in a point where you're panicking and you feel like you need somebody who understands how to help somebody in a state of crisis. I have that handy for my friends, my family, anybody who might need it. Like I said, it's not just for somebody contemplating suicide. If you think somebody is going to benefit from it and you worry that you might offend them, I always say send it anyways, just because it's better to be safe than sorry. And, you can always apologize to somebody later if they have that, but you did your part. So I always stress, have that handy. Always reach out to it if you need to, especially if you're in therapy and you can't always access your therapist. All right. Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that so many people are going to the support groups. They're really helpful. I do know that they've been doing some more too, like they were doing some on just OCD, some on building boundaries, which is really, really important, I think, for anybody to have boundaries. So yeah, if you haven't gone to one of them, I would definitely suggest checking them out, but they're really good. But what other questions do you guys have? Especially, you can ask me as somebody that has gone through therapy. Again, I work for an OCD, so I'm a peer advisor there. If you have any questions on the therapy side, what to expect in therapy, or how peer advising works, you can definitely ask that as well. I'm not sure if my connection is lagging a little bit. Hopefully not. Yeah, so I guess I can also talk about too some of the changes that we've made with therapy and OCD. One of the biggest things that I think is really nice for a lot of people is there's not really a cutoff now for doing therapy. Not that there really ever was, but I think that a lot of people felt that once therapy started to taper down, you were kind of set up to eventually start doing therapy on your own and starting to practice ERP on your own. And they actually don't really set up a end time for stopping therapy. So it's continued as long as you need it. Personally, I'm somebody that's a big advocate in ongoing support. I think that, if you're getting therapy and you're doing really well and you're in a point of recovery, going down to like once a month sessions is definitely a good idea. So I would suggest definitely, if you're already in OCD, talk about how ongoing therapy would look with your therapist. We also started offering help for body-focused repetitive behaviors. So like skin picking, tics, hair pulling, things like that a lot of times do come with OCD. So they did get training in that. We can also help with hoarding too. I know that was something that I struggled with in the beginning. So, they're starting to be able to help with a lot of these disorders that come along with OCD as well. So anything like that. And if you guys have suggestions, definitely throw them out there. There's all kinds of things that we're learning and adapting with and growing with. So, biggest thing is we're here to help, but yeah. All right, Elizabeth. I struggle with the feeling of dread after all the work I've done on not ruminating. It has left me with this dread as if it's replaced the thoughts. I'm trying to think. So I guess I would ask to maybe go more in depth with that. I'm not sure if, and again, I'm not a clinician, so I can't say for sure what my advice would be on that. But I would say that especially after going through therapy, a lot of people have different feelings that come about. And that's totally normal. I know that whenever I was going through therapy and I, started to have a lot of improvements and my symptoms improving, I got scared, like, oh my gosh, what if my OCD goes away? Who am I going to be without my OCD? It was looking back a really silly thing to think because I know who I am without my OCD. And now I have this ability to help other people get started with therapy and talk to people the same way that I wish somebody would have opened up their arms to me when I first started. But I was scared and basically had an identity crisis. So I would say, feelings of dread, try to push through them if you can. It is definitely normal to have these weird feelings. I know some people, like I said earlier, whenever they're going through therapy and they start to be able to get through these intrusive thoughts without that anxiety feeling that comes with them. A lot of times people sometimes get panicked and think, what if I like these thoughts? And it's definitely not that you like the thoughts. It's that you are okay with the thought coming through and understanding that it is just a thought and it's not anything to do with you. And then eventually being able to let it go. So, I would say roll with the punches as you can with those. But I see that we're getting a lot of other good questions. So let me go in here. Okay, Brianna says, my health-related OCD has been really bad lately, having a hard time not giving into compulsions for the fear that I will risk my health. I'm not sure how to break the chain and stop giving in. It's really hard to do ERP, especially whenever you feel like you're risking your health by resisting compulsions. I completely understand how that may be hard. Brianna, if you're not in therapy already, I would really suggest getting started, just because ERP in itself is really hard to do with anybody in any theme, especially if you haven't done it with a therapist and learned how to properly practice it. So I would say that if you're not in therapy, Brianna, I would really get started with OCD. I'm sure that you're familiar with it if you're already on here, but if you're not, I would talk to a therapist. I learned a lot of really great skills for doing ERP through my OCD therapist. I knew nothing about how to manage my OCD before. So if you're in this point where you understand OCD and you have good skills to manage it, even if you're just sharpening and honing in on those skills, I would recommend getting started with a therapist just to kind of strengthen your toolkit, so to speak. Yes, Elizabeth, I completely get that. OCD does want to sabotage your identity without it. It is something that I know Dr. McGrath said on one of his lives the other day. OCD wants to make you feel safe and make you feel like if you don't listen to its rules that you're not safe and that you're in danger. And it's not the case. I think that's one of the most empowering parts about doing ERP is after you get through the exposures, as hard and as not fun as they are, you get out on the other side and you realize that, hey, this voice that was telling me all these things, that this bad thing was going to happen, I see is not true. And it's really hard to predict that before you go through it. But whenever you get through it, you realize that you are this amazing person without your OCD, and you can be this amazing person in spite of your OCD. I like I said, whenever I hear people say that they wish they could go back to who they were before they had their OCD come out, I really never wish that, because I feel like I've become so more in touch with myself and my mental health going through this journey. I talk to other people that I also would say the same thing. They've grown so much as people just by overcoming this huge obstacle that life threw at us. So that's something that I try to keep in mind, especially on the days that are kind of rough. Okay, Andy, I see that you put multiple, so I'm going to click through them all. Question regarding uncertainty, doubt, and backdoor spikes, or not having that anxious feeling when getting an intrusive thought. How do you accept it's actually OCD/pure O? You said, I'm tired of this and I don't want to deal with this anymore, and there's no way out. I genuinely don't believe it's OCD, and I'm actually what I fear. So I think this is definitely something that is very, very common. I think I mentioned earlier that sometimes when people get that feeling that they have an intrusive thought or, something that our OCD would normally trigger us really bad, and we've worked hard on it, and, all of a sudden we don't really get so triggered by it. It's not so much that we're enjoying the thought. I'm going to use an example with POCD. And if this is going to trigger anybody, I won't go into specifics, but if I, get an intrusive thought related to the POCD theme, I would, if I get a intrusive thought related to that, I would, sorry about that, guys. Okay. If I get an intrusive thought related to something with POCD, of course, it's going to be very distressing. It's going to, not be something that we want to be thinking about, where somebody without OCD would think, oh, that's a really weird and uncomfortable thought. I'm going to let that go. Us with POCD would get stuck on it, and it would start to make us question who we are as people. What is wrong with us that we have this thought? What does this mean? We start to avoid anything that might make us think that thought, whether it's kids, whether it's, children, families, whatever it may be. So the process of when you're going through ERP and you start to not get so triggered by those anymore, it's not to say that all of a sudden you like to have those intrusive thoughts relating to pedophilia or whatever it is. It's that you're recognizing that it's not you, that it's OCD, and that this doesn't mean anything about who you are as a person. And you can get to that point where you can let it pass like somebody without OCD would, thinking that's a really weird thought. I don't really know what it means, but I'm going to let it go. And it's a scary thing to do because we doubt. OCD is nicknamed the doubting disorder. So I would say that try to remember that whenever you're getting to a point where, you feel that backdoor spikes are happening or you're not getting anxious by an intrusive thought. Remember the progress that you've made and that this is something that, you're at a different point. These thoughts are still going to come from time to time, but they're not going to be as scary anymore because of all the hard work that you've put in. And yeah, like Anna said, you're definitely, you can recover and you're definitely not alone in this. Okay, but yeah, really good questions, guys. Brianna, I skipped over yours, said, I am in the process of restarting therapy with an OCD therapist. I've had therapy before, but the health anxiety is the hardest. Hopefully, as I continue, it will get better. I think it definitely will. I think sometimes there's an expectation that whenever you go through therapy once, you have to be better, and that's definitely not the case. And I think that's why I like so much the idea of being in recovery, because it's an ongoing process that, we work on and we take care of ourselves. And we might not be in this place of intense suffering that we were when we started, but it's definitely something that, we have to keep working on. And as new challenges come up, like health anxiety, it's, restarting with therapy is a great idea. I know that whenever I went through therapy, I had kind of a lapse where I got really bad again, like midway through. And I kind of had to kick back and start up a lot of the work that I had done. And I'm very, very thankful that I did, because I think that was a major turning point in my recovery. Like before, I was kind of going through the motions, and while I was improving, I wasn't making great progress. I was kind of just going through the motions. When I hit this major lapse midway through, it really set me into this different mindset where I was like, I'm the one that's going to save myself. I can't wait to get better, because it's not going to get better unless I take this seriously. And it became this huge turning point that I'm very grateful that, I went backwards in my therapy journey basically and started from the beginning, because it's really what helped and stuck in the end. Oh, Andy, I love this. How do I open up about my themes to do ERP? This is something that I always try to tell people at the beginning of starting therapy, because this is something that I wish somebody would have told me, because I had no idea. I had never talked to anybody with OCD. I didn't really understand what was normal versus abnormal with OCD. I didn't understand what was my OCD even. So I didn't really know what thoughts to share. My biggest piece of advice for this is to honestly just share everything. The beauty of working with somebody who's an OCD specialist is they've heard all the types of thoughts you can think of, every weird, ugly, scary thought that, we might be having, anything that might seem like it's not serious enough or too serious. They don't care about what your intrusive thought is. They care about how it's making you feel. And that's something that I learned really the hard way, because I was holding in a lot of stuff that I thought might sound silly and my therapist or anybody else might not understand. And it was distressing me at an insane amount. And I was just holding it in for so long because I thought somebody might not understand. And when I finally did open up and I got help, not only did my therapist take it seriously and say, hey, I am this is OCD, Casie, and I can help you with this, let's work on this. And all of a sudden, this thing that I thought I just had to suffer with, I was able to actively fight and do something about. So the more you can open up about it, the better it's going to be. And even if you feel like you're at a point where you can't really explain it or you don't know why, talk about it anyways. I know so many times I had intrusive thoughts and compulsions that I didn't really know why I was having them or how to go about talking about it. And my therapist actually helped me navigate it, looking at, what my core fear was behind this thought. If this happened, then what was I afraid of? And it was not always easy. It took a lot of thinking and kind of backtracking through that rabbit hole that we find ourselves in. But the more you can open up to them, the better it is. And it also improves your communication skills. I know that since going through therapy, I have gotten a lot better at talking to other people about my OCD, talking to them about what OCD really is, because we all know that people misunderstand the disorder. So just being able to explain it in ways that the average person can understand. So many things have improved since learning to open up about it. And I think another important thing to remember, Andy, and anybody else that's opening up about your OCD, is the beautiful thing about OCD and opening up about our disorder is we don't have to jump right into our most intrusive thoughts. You can start out by sharing with somebody that you have OCD, that this is something that you struggle with. If they want to know more, you can talk about the different subtypes and maybe which ones affect you directly. You guys can see Luna. You can choose how much detail you want to go in with somebody. And I think that is a really beautiful thing that oftentimes people don't really get the option of. And I know that even with myself, there's people that I share more with than others with my OCD. And it's not so much that I don't trust them. It's just that it's a lot to explain. I'm sure as you guys know. So yeah, I would say that practice opening up to people, practice explaining what it is. And if anyone needs help explaining different themes, the blogs on our website are really great resources for that. They lay out in very basic terms what a lot of the different themes are. I actually use a lot of them to explain things like POCD and harm OCD to people. And I think the best way to explain it is to just say, OCD goes off of our worst fears. It feeds off of our worst fears. These intrusive thoughts that we have, they bother us and stick so much because we're so afraid of them. If we didn't mind these thoughts, we wouldn't mind them coming all the time. But it's kind of like the pink elephant example that we use. Whenever we try so hard not to think about something for so long, it becomes all we're thinking about. So it kind of makes sense that this is where we get stuck. Okay. Yeah, Brianna, I completely understand what you're saying. It's hard whenever you feel like you're just going through the motions with therapy, and it's not really getting absorbed. And I think that's why I always try to tell people that ERP is a lot more hands-on than regular talk therapy, in my opinion, but I think in a good way. And it's another reason why I think talk therapy isn't always really helpful with OCD, because we don't really know why we have our intrusive thoughts. We don't really know why these things get stuck, these topics, these, whatever it may be. So talking about them isn't really going to help. We're just kind of spinning our tires in a circle and going through the motions of what our OCD is on a day-to-day basis. ERP kind of takes a different approach, where instead of trying to figure out why we're stuck on this thought, we look at how can we get unstuck and how can we move past it? What is the thought behind this that we're getting so caught up on, and how can we get to a point where we can separate that from ourselves? It's not easy, and it takes a lot of hard work. But it's something that I think in the end you can be really proud of, because you pulled yourself out of that point. I know that whenever I was finishing my regular therapy and I was going more into like check-ins here and there with my therapist, I thanked her so many times. I was like, you literally saved my life. You changed my life. I don't know how I got to be this person. And she told me so many times, you did this, not me. And at first I was like, no, I did not. I did nothing. But looking back, you really are the person that saves you and changes you because, like I said, and like Brianna said, we can go through the motions with the therapist, but we're the ones that have to put in the effort and make that change and practice ERP. And even, if you set out to do a 10-minute exposure and you only go through 7 minutes, that's still 7 minutes more than what you were going to do before. That's still 7 minutes of you actively resisting doing a compulsion. So any bit of practice is better than no practice. I kind of compare it to like going to the gym and working a muscle. It's, nobody likes to go to the gym, or if you do, good for you. But it's, we have to kind of build up our courage to go to the gym. And whenever we go, even if we're not there for an hour, if we're only there for 45 minutes, we're still proud. We still did a really good job. So I would say to kind of look at ERP and practicing working through our exposures that way. So we can look at it more as a positive. We're still making efforts. We're still taking a step forward. And, like that quote, if you can't walk, crawl. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But either way, you're still making progress. So I think especially with what we're tackling, that's something that's going to be really important to remember because, this isn't easy and we have to take it a step at a time. And if we have 4 really good days and 1 bad day, we can't let that 1 bad day discount all of the hard work that we put into it. So, take it day by day. And if you're working with a therapist, keep pushing at it, keep working with them. If you're not in therapy yet and you don't feel like you're ready, go to a support group and talk to somebody. Hear what therapy is about. Ask those tough questions. Practice opening up about your intrusive thoughts, especially with people that are going to understand. Everyone, I can say since working with an OCD and talking to people with OCD on a daily basis, we all share the same struggles and the same intrusive thoughts. So, anytime that you feel you're alone and you're the only one that has these uncomfortable thoughts or, goes through this thing that's hard to explain, there's other people out there who understand and can help and support you. So, the best thing I can say is to really open up with all of this and talk about it with people who don't have OCD, because the world knows that we need to destigmatize this so more people can get help. And I think that's why I don't really have any problem talking about mine so much anymore, because I know that as much as it might be weird at first, there's people that are benefiting from it, and there's someone out there like me that might have needed to have heard it at one point or another. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, definitely chime in. I feel like I'm talking to myself at this point. Okay, Emmy, I want to start therapy, but I feel so overwhelmed. I have so many thoughts and feelings that I want to talk about that I don't even know where to begin. That is okay. And I think that's the toughest part about starting therapy, is this feeling like we have to unravel everything in the beginning. And I think, whenever you're starting therapy, you have the opportunity to open up and basically give your backstory. So if you want to start therapy and the idea of all of these thoughts and feelings that you want to share is overwhelming, something that I always recommend to people is whenever you're getting started, try to write down before you go to your first session what you want to talk about, what your OCD looks like to you on a day-to-day basis, or even in the last 2 weeks, might be a good place to start if it changes up a lot. But usually, even if it sounds like our OCD is all over the place, and I remember when I was putting together my hierarchy in therapy, I thought that there was no pattern with mine. It was all over the place, and it was going to be so difficult to treat. a lot of times they kind of revolve around the same themes, around the same fears, even if it doesn't look obvious on the outside. But if you want to go to therapy, I would say start small. You don't have to make sure that your therapist has your entire life story whenever you're getting started. I think the most important thing is going into it with the idea that I need help in this current moment, and this is how my OCD is affecting me today. I want to start working at it. And if things change up midway through therapy, that's totally okay. I had a hierarchy written when I first started therapy, and I was adding things to it and changing things all the time. So you're definitely not the only person that, it can feel overwhelming when we first start. It feels like there's so much that we have to talk about and so much we have to explain. But another nice thing too is that, working with somebody who's an OCD specialist, we don't have to take that time to explain why we're having these thoughts or what this subtype of OCD is, because they already have a really good understanding of it. Andy said, what's the difference between ERP and CBT? So I don't know if a lot of people know this, but actually ERP is a branch under CBT. So CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. And underneath that specifically is ERP, which is exposure and response prevention. Exposure and response prevention is a certain type of therapy that is specifically geared towards helping people like people with OCD, people with PTSD. It helps us get to a point where we can retrain our brains not to have this fear response to something that shouldn't be causing us fear, whether it's a memory, a thought, something that gets stuck, basically. So with ERP, and I think something that gets really scary for some people is this thought that we have to face our fears. And I think a really good way that I try to explain ERP to people so that it seems a little bit more doable is, whenever we're facing our fears, we're doing it in a very manageable way. So whenever you're doing ERP, you're slowly exposing yourself to things that would trigger your OCD and changing the way that you react. So I kind of look at it as whenever you have OCD, and I'm sure that you guys can definitely relate, we have an obsessive thought or intrusive thought or something come up that gives us anxiety. We do a compulsion, whether that's doing a ritual, checking, seeking reassurance, which I was very guilty of all the time. Anything like that to make ourselves momentarily feel better. We kind of get this instant release of dopamine. We feel good, we feel safe, but eventually it dies down and it keeps cycling through this circle. ERP kind of works to break that cycle where instead of doing a compulsion, whether it's reassurance seeking, checking, whatever it may be, it forces you to, in short spurts, sit with that feeling and basically recognize that we're safe, that there's nothing to be afraid of, that, these thoughts aren't real. And it's hard, and it's very hard to face, this anxiety feeling. And but I will say it's not as intense, I think, as it sounds. And I use the example of somebody has a fear of spiders. If somebody came to us and they wanted to do ERP therapy for fear of spiders, so to speak, ERP therapy wouldn't look like taking you and throwing you into a tank of spiders. That would be very traumatizing and probably not work, right? So if you had a fear of spiders and you were housebound and it was impacting your everyday life to a point where you couldn't sleep, you couldn't go anywhere because of this fear of spiders, we might start off at writing a short story where you look at the idea of maybe you walk into a room and there's a spider and sit with that anxiety feeling that it might give you. After doing that, we might graduate to looking at a picture of a spider and sitting with that feeling and thinking about what if that was in real life, letting that anxiety build and then go down naturally and measuring that response. After that, maybe you would move on to sitting outside on the porch and telling yourself, I might see a spider, I might not, but I can live with that uncertainty that I might not know. And that's where a lot of that uncertainty comes in, of sitting with that feeling that, we can't have this perfect answer for our OCD that if we do this, we will never see a spider ever again, because it's impossible to know. We never know what can happen tomorrow. And that's the nice part about breaking from these rules that our OCD gives us, because we can't really follow them anyways. And so on and so forth. So, we're never sitting you with a spider. We're never throwing spiders on you and saying, don't be afraid of this. We're getting you to a point where the idea that one day you might see a spider, or, you might have a spider on you, the idea of it isn't scaring you anymore. And, if I had a spider on me one day, I'd probably jump and scream too, but it's not preventing me from going outside, and it's not preventing me from living my life. So that's kind of the idea with ERP, is we're getting you to a point that, you're not in love with spiders, but you're not letting that fear dictate what you're doing in your everyday life anymore, and you can move on from that anxiety. Okay. So Elizabeth said, do you ever feel like OCD is stronger than you are and that it tries to weaken you? I know they say it's like a bully. It's as if the distortion of the thought feels so much bigger at times. I think that maybe at one point in time, I thought that my OCD was stronger than me, but doing therapy and overcoming it has definitely flipped the switch on that. I think it's also something that it's as strong as how much power you give to it. So I know that I actually was watching a YouTube Live with Dr. McGrath the other night, and he talked about even supporting somebody with OCD. So like if you're a parent and your child has OCD and you feel like the OCD is just growing and growing and it's taking over, the whole home, the first thing that you can do is start looking at how much you're catering to the OCD and how much you're making exceptions and doing what you can to make your OCD comfortable. Because the more you accommodate it, the bigger it grows. So the first thing that you want to start doing is, laying boundaries and saying, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to be okay with this. And it's uncomfortable at first. It's extremely uncomfortable, but it's the first important step to start changing that scale so that it's not overpowering you and it's not making you feel so weak. Okay, yes, Andy. I know you're asking Elizabeth, but I also want to chime in with this too. Rumination is obsessing and overthinking. This is something that I had so much problems with whenever I was going through therapy, and even afterwards for a long time. It took a lot of practice not to ruminate, and I still catch myself doing it. But now if I catch myself doing it, I catch myself after like 2 or 3 minutes versus 45 minutes, catching myself and being like, oh my gosh, I was just thinking about this for so long. I don't even know what time it is, where I'm at, anything like that. So I think the important thing to remember whenever you're ruminating, which is a mental compulsion, if you didn't know, is, we're trying to figure something out and we can't. Our OCD is trying to tell us that the sky is purple, and instead of saying, yeah, it might be purple, I don't know, or, realizing I don't think it's purple, but I'm going to let that thought go. Ruminating is like we're sitting and thinking, why are we thinking that it's purple? What reason might it be purple? Is something wrong with our eyes? All these things. And there's not really a correct answer to it. Our OCD is telling us one thing. It's an intrusive thought, and we sit and ruminate and obsess over it. And it is very, very hard to break ourselves out of it. So I think as you're learning to break out of rumination, be very gentle with yourself, because it's not something that's easy to do. It's something that takes a lot of practice. But it's really trying to recognize, look for signs that you're ruminating. Something that I used to do is I used to sit and Google things over and over again, and I would sit on my phone for the longest time just looking for different answers, looking into, I find one solution, then I would look into something else, and I would start to spiral down this rabbit hole of what I thought was me educating myself, but really I was just kind of spinning in circles, trying to get more and more answers for something that I really couldn't get the answer to. And if not that, I would continuously check something. I would look at it again and again because I thought maybe I didn't look at it right the first time, or I didn't really look at it the first time, or whatever it may be. Things that you say them out loud and they don't really make sense, but we all can relate to this with OCD. So all these things, I would start to look for signs, and I would see that, okay, I'm ruminating on this. I need to get up and walk away. And I would try to mentally walk away, somehow distract myself, do something to take my mind off of it. And as much as I wanted to go back and look at it or check or whatever it may be, I didn't. I said, I'm going to walk away from this. I'm going to fight this urge that I need to go back and revisit it. And it's really hard, but eventually you get to a point where, you might even forget about what you were obsessing about, or it doesn't really bother you anymore, or even postponing it and saying, I'm going to think about this in an hour. And sometimes that hour would come and I would forget about it. And it was amazing. Okay. Is vivid and distressing dreams common with OCD or when we take medication for OCD? This has been bothering me because I feel like garbage, awful for having these dreams, and I can't even apologize. Andy, I am so sorry that you're going through this right now. I also have had really vivid, distressing dreams, and I know how uncomfortable and how hard they are to deal with. I would say that I'm not sure how common it is for OCD, but I know that a lot of antidepressants and medications for OCD can have vivid dreams as side effects. I'm not a clinician, so I can't really say for sure whether that's really a true side effect for you. So I would say if you're on any certain medication, I would talk to your psychiatrist or your doctor that prescribed it to learn more about it. I know for me personally, that was something that I had to look into my sleep hygiene for and look at, side effects for medications, different things like that. But it's hard because we can't help what we dream about. We can't help what comes into our mind when we're asleep. And it can cause us to be really distressed the next morning. So I would say, especially with that, try to look at it like you would with any other intrusive thought. This isn't something that we have to assign meaning to. This isn't something that has to have a lot of truth with us. And, sometimes it helps to find a way to let it go. I know that for me, I would write down the dream that I had if it was really distressing to me, and I would either throw it away or rip up the paper or whatever it is, but just get it out of my head, if that makes sense, because I try to look at it as something that came into my head and I needed to let it pass somehow. And it's hard, but I think especially if you find things that are reoccurring, it might be beneficial. And then also looking at things like, if you're watching things at night that might trigger a certain dream, or if you're having a certain intrusive thought that maybe you haven't worked through yet, it definitely can make sense that our intrusive thoughts would leak into our dreams. But I think that might be even more of a reason that we should overcome them, that we shouldn't let OCD dictates so much of our life that it's starting to impact our sleep schedules too and our dreams. So it's hard to say, but I think that like anything else with our OCD, we have to take it a step at a time, and whatever obstacles come up, we can't look at it as something that's going to stop us and prevent us from moving forward. It's something else that we can overcome and accomplish. So, just from talking with you guys in the comments tonight, I think that you have a lot of really great awareness for your OCD, and discussing these things of, what is still impacting you and how to overcome it shows that you have motivation and drive to continue fighting this. And I think that's the best thing that we can do every day, is tell ourselves that we're going to wake up and keep fighting this and keep working to get better. And that's the best thing that we can ask for ourselves. And the more we get better, the more we can help other people, and we can all overcome this really crappy disorder. So it is 8:02 Central Time, so I am going to go ahead and end this live. Guys, again, if you're practicing ERP, you're doing an amazing job. Remember, it's not all or nothing. Any practice helps. We do these lives almost every weekday night, I think now. So definitely tune in for more. I think tomorrow night, if it's, Wednesday, I think Dr. McGrath does on Wednesday night still. So definitely tune in and watch what he has to say. He's very knowledgeable about everything OCD. And, keep talking about all this. Keep working at it. This is something that we take a step at a time, but the path for recovery is not linear, and it is definitely a journey, but it is one that you come out of stronger every single day. So really proud of you all. We're all in this together. Have a great rest of your night. Bye, guys.